Who's ready for a 2024 Moon Druid build? Me. I am. I've been waiting too long and it's time to do one. Let's go. Welcome to D4. So, a couple of weeks ago, I did a video on all of the best beasts for Druid Wild Shape under the new 2024 rules for every challenge rating. Watch it here if you missed it. Now that we've finally got that info, that knowledge under our belts, yes, the time has come for us to put it to good use and build a Moon Druid. Because knowing about the beasts that you can transform into is actually just one part of what makes a good Moon Druid, right? We need to figure out what spells we're going to use, what feats we should take, what we should be doing in combat, etc., etc. Now, Druids, and maybe especially Moon Druids, got a ton of changes for the new rules, more than just changes to the beasts that they can change into. Some changes are arguably nerfs. I'm not 100% convinced of that myself, actually, but we'll talk about it. But then there are undoubtedly some buffs as well, and changes to spells, and I'm really excited to explore how to combine all of these things in a way to make a really powerful shapeshifter. And I mean really powerful. In fact, I'm so excited about all of the Moon Druid stuff that, you know what? I don't even think I'm going to multi-class today. That's how good I think Moon Druids are now. So yeah, no more preamble. We have a ton to go over, and it gets complicated. So let's jump in to D&D episode number 201, the new and improved Moon Druid. Huge thanks to my good friend Randall Hampton for the fantastic artwork that he put together for the build today. He does this every week, and I really loved the way that he kind of captured like the Druid in the process of transforming, right? They're going into wild shape. It looks so cool. Anyways, if you'd be interested in following Randall to check out the other stuff that he's done and maybe even commission him to create some artwork for your character or maybe even your entire party, I'll put links in the video description as always on how to do so. All right, so at level 1 for our starting class, yes, we're going Druid. I will say this. I did think about going with a level 1 monk dip here. Now that the bonus action unarmed strike that you can make as a monk isn't tied to taking the attack action, it might be a way to add a little damage to our turn while wild shaped even, but in the end, I don't really think it's worth it. I think we get better damage generally by just scaling our Druid level for higher CR beasts that we can wild shape into and for better spell and spell slot progression, as well as, you know, picking up some other nice Druid and Moon Druid features. It's worth considering that dip. And at some levels, it might be better, right? But eventually we get a beast form that has a built-in bonus action anyways. So yeah, I think we just stick with straight Druid today. For our species, this might sound a little weird, but I'm honestly gonna just say a PYF here, though. I think if it were me, I'd probably go human, maybe dwarf. So here's one big difference between the 2014 and the 2024 versions of Wild Shape. In 2014, we were told that we got to keep, among other things, our racial features when wild shaped. In 2024, keeping any species features is expressly left out. So I suppose that means that things like luck from halfling or being able to transform as an ASMR or even grow big and topple people if you were a hill giant Goliath wouldn't be usable while wild shaped. And since we're building a Moon Druid, I'm basically going to assume that we're always wild shaped, right? At least in combat. So the question then becomes, what counts as a species trait that you would still be able to enjoy, whether you are wild shaped or not? The two best ones that I can think of would be human, so that we just get an extra origin feat, always handy, or dwarf, since they get an extra hit point per level, and we do now keep our own hit points when we wild shape, right? But let me know in the comments if you think there's a better pick that I missed here. As for our background, I'm gonna say, you know, either take a custom or old background, like I always say, but if you can't, Farmer will work just fine for us, since it gives us the right ability score increase options and the feat that's most important to me for this build, the origin feat that is, and for that we're taking tough. This increases our hit points by 2 for every level, and I mean, sure, everyone can always use more hit points, but this feels maybe more important than ever for Moon Druids to me now. If you recall, Wild Shape used to let us take on the hit points of the beast we were transforming into, and then when those expired, we'd drop out of Wild Shape, right? Now, much to the dismay of lots of people online, you just get a fixed amount of temporary hit points when you Wild Shape, regardless of what you Wild Shape into. But then the Wild Shape just lasts until you are incapacitated. And if I'm being honest, I think I prefer it this way for a couple of reasons. One, it doesn't punish you for picking a less tanky Wild Shape option. And then 2, it potentially lets you be in wild shape longer. Now, yeah, it kind of sucks that wild shape could drop if you get stunned or something, right? Being incapacitated doesn't just mean being knocked to 0 hit points. But barring that, while sure, you might be less tanky overall, maybe, depending on what beast you're transforming into and how many wild shape uses you had left, etc., though we do get a bump to our AC that I'll talk about later. Anyways, if you're instead just adding your own hit points to the extra temporary hit points you get, and now you just get to stay wild shaped until you get like knocked out or stunned or whatever, well, it just might mean staying wild shaped longer overall, right? And just getting those extra hit points for wild shaping under the old rules might have been a little overtuned anyways, especially at low levels, right? Anyways, all this to say that it feels to me like getting lots of hit points on our Moon Druid is, yeah, more important than ever before, so let's grab Tough. If you went human, then you'd get another origin feat here in addition to Tough, right? And I would love to have Lucky for a nice advantage, disadvantage option, or Alert for better initiative, or even Musician to give your party heroic inspiration after resting, but Dwarf would also be awesome for just like even more hit points, right? You make the call. For our ability scores, I'm gonna assume that we're going the point buy method as always and say, let's get a 15 wisdom, take a +2 there, a 15 constitution and +1, and then a 14 dexterity. And I wouldn't say that the 14 dexterity is strictly necessary. I just like it for the initiative bonus more than anything. And it will be important for our AC and saving throws when we're not wild shaped at least. But, you know, feel free to put those points into intelligence or charisma if you really wanted to instead. For starting equipment, I'm going to say let's grab some studded leather or scale mail. Talk about that in a sec. And then a shield and just probably a staff for now. The armor will really just be useful again when we're not wild shaped, and you might not actually have medium armor proficiency. It will depend on what choice you make for the Primal Order feature that we now get at Druid 1, which lets us choose between being a Warden, giving us proficiency with medium armor and martial weapons, or a Magician, which gives us an extra Druid cantrip and lets us add our Wisdom modifier to our Arcana or Nature checks. I think personally I'd probably go Magician here. If you think you'll be out of wild shape a lot in combat, whether because your DM likes to incapacitate you on a regular basis, or because you tend to have a lot of combat encounters between short and long rests, right? And maybe you're going to be running out of wild shape uses, then feel free to go Warden and increase your AC. And remember, there's no longer any kind of prohibition against druids wearing metal, so the scale mail shouldn't be a problem unless you're a conscientious objector. We also get Druidic at Druid 1, that special language that druids can kind of speak or write, leaving messages for each other in the wild with sticks and leaves and things. And then we get spells, of course, and you're going to want guidance for the extra D4 to ability checks, utility, right? I'd probably grab Shillelagh at least at level 1 for a good cantrip melee damage option with like Poison Spray and or Thorn Whip maybe, making for a nice ranged option. For level 1 spells, you'll want some healing, of course, and Goodberry brings decent utility as well as healing, but it's kind of not as good as it used to be, both because the single level dip into Life Cleric doesn't do what it used to for the spell, nor can you become a Life Cleric with just a single dip, I guess, but also because Healing Word and Cure Wounds got so buffed. I think personally I'm probably getting Healing Word for now, since we will get Cure Wounds for free later. For concentration, your go-to spells are going to be Entangle to potentially restrain enemies and Fairy Fire to potentially give advantage on attacks against them. Finally, consider the Longstrider spell. It gives an extra 10 feet of move speed for an hour, and it doesn't require concentration. I wish it lasted longer, but there's no reason why that increased move speed shouldn't affect you while wild shaped, right? And as we'll see later, that could really come in handy sometimes. You know who else is really handy? My segues are the worst. My channel members. You guys are so awesome. I could not do what I do without you. So thank you so much for your support. It really means the world to me. If you're not a member of the channel, I'd love it if you'd consider becoming one. There's a button down there that says join. You click on it and it tells you about all the benefits you could get by being a channel member. And regardless of the level that you sign up for, and so long as you sign up at the silver level or higher, you get all of the perks that I offer. I would just ask that you pay what you feel you can and what you think it's worth. But yeah, you can get access to the library of write-ups that I do for each of these builds to help you recreate it more easily yourself. Access to the D4 community Discord server filled with so many lovely, amazing, wonderful people. And even access to the live monthly Q&A hangout sessions that we do, which I'm recording this Friday. It already happened for those of you watching this. But anyways, super excited. I love those Q&As. They're so much fun, and I just really like hanging out with you guys. So thanks for considering. And you know what? If you can't or don't want to become a channel member, that's fine. I appreciate you being here, watching, liking, subscribing, all of the things. Those are also great ways to support me. So thank you. Okay, at level 2, we get Wild Shape. So let's break it down just a little bit more than we already have. You can now, with a bonus action, transform into a beast of 1/4 challenge rating or lower that does not have a fly speed. Swim speeds are okay now, even at level 2, for a number of hours equal to half your druid level or until you become incapacitated. We can now do this twice per long rest, but we regain just 1 use of it with a short rest. We do gain more uses of it per day with more druid levels though. While shapeshifted, you retain your personality, memories, and your ability to speak now, yay, no more grunting bears. Many of your statistics, however, remain your characters, namely your mental ability scores, right? Your wisdom, intelligence, and charisma. Also your class features, importantly, even if you were to multi-class, yes, though we're not doing so today, your languages and your feats. Again, excluded now are species features. You also keep your own skill proficiencies, as well as gaining those of the beast form if they have any, and if you both have proficiency in a skill, you use the higher one basically. Finally, as we've said, you also now keep your own hit points, though you do gain temporary hit points equal to your druid level for now, which yeah, isn't a lot, I know, but that'll get a nice improvement for us in a minute, so hang tight. Now, in addition, you can still no longer cast spells while wild-shaped, though we will get a few exceptions to that rule in a minute, and you can still concentrate on a spell that you've cast before wild-shaping, which is a big deal and something we'll be taking advantage of. Another important change here is that we used to kind of just be able to transform into whatever beast we wanted as long as it met the requirements otherwise, right? We now are told that we have to choose just 4 options, and we can only transform into one of those 4. This has a lot of people upset. I think I'm generally fine with it. I mean, yeah, we lose a little diversity and versatility, but it keeps things a little simpler for both the player and the DM. 4 is going to be plenty for most situations, and you do get more options as you gain levels, up to 8 forms eventually. And yes, you can swap out a known form with a long rest. Okay, as for what 1/4 CR beasts we should probably transforming into at this level, as I went over in that best beasts for wild shape video, I'd probably go with the giant venomous snake, the giant wolf spider, the giant centipede, and the giant frog here at this level. If you want to know why, I go into greater detail in that video. Since we'll only be at 1/4 CR for a single level, I'm not going to spend a lot of time going into the details here. We also do get the Wild Companion feature that was introduced in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, right, in the player's handbook now, telling us that we can spend a use of our wild shape to cast the Find Familiar spell without even needing the expensive material components, which is nice. And thankfully, that familiar lasts now until we take a long rest, so we don't have to keep resummoning them. Yes, I'll plan on having a familiar, of course I will. They're so useful. And we love animals more than anyone, even if they're Fey spirit animals. All right, at level 3. We get our subclass, our Druid Circle, and yes, we're going with Circle of the Moon, of course, so let's talk about all the juicy things we get and how some of those things have changed from 2014. First up, we get the most important Moon Druid feature, Circle Forms, which lets us wild shape into beasts that have a CR equal to our Druid level divided by 3, rounded down. That means CR1 beasts for us right now, hooray. Also, the temporary hit points that we get when we wild shape equals 3 times our druid level, much better, and pretty incentivizing for us not to multi-class, right? And finally, we actually get an AC bump over our wild shape form. This is so very welcome. It will now be 13 plus our wisdom modifier, and that's just a lot better than it used to be. I appreciate that it still won't be amazing necessarily, but it will help us survive a bit better, so that's nice. Okay, so what beasts should we consider wild shaping into now? Well, again, I went over my favorites in that best beasts for wild shape video, but let's just quickly rehash these ones here. The giant spider is really solid, especially for utility. The giant octopus can be situationally fun and useful for grappling. The giant toad is great if you want to swallow baddies and keep them from doing anything other than trying to kill you from the inside, a la Drax the Destroyer, I suppose. But I think my go-to here would generally be not the brown bear, Now, that got hit with the Nerf bat pretty hard, but the greatly improved Lion, which can make 2 attacks that have a +5 to hit and hit for 1d8 plus 3 each, and can even substitute one of those attacks to Roar if they want to, which frightens a single enemy for a round if they fail their admittedly low DC 11 Wisdom save. What's more, Lions get the really potent pack tactics, giving them advantage on their attacks if an ally is within 5 feet of your target, and a pretty sweet running leap feature that lets them long jump 25 feet if they use 10 feet of move speed first. Considering their already hefty 50-foot speed, that means we can go 75 feet on our turn without even dashing. That's awesome. So yeah, the Lion is pretty great. It might not be the 2014 Moon Druid in brown bear form for potency, but frankly, that was a little overtuned at level 2. I think most would agree, right? This still feels really powerful, but a little more balanced, in my opinion, and even brings a little utility and control with it too. Lions rock. But we also get 2nd level Druid spells at this level, and Moon Druids both get some nice additional free ones now, yay, and we're told that we can cast those free ones, those Circle of the Moon spells specifically, while wild-shaped. That's pretty amazing, really, and makes Moon Druids a lot more versatile and powerful. At this level, our free moon spells are Cure Wounds, so that we can heal ourselves or others while wild-shaped, so great, and then Starry Wisp, a nice little ranged damage cantrip that can prevent enemies from going invisible, and Moonbeam. Thank goodness they gave Moon Druids the most moony spell in the game now, right? Moonbeam is decent. A little AoE, area of effect damage with concentration that can damage every round. I thought about trying to build around it, maybe trying to grapple and move enemies into and then hold them in the area of effect to get damage from it twice per round. It's not a bad option, but the potential problem with Moonbeam is that it specifically says that if someone in the area is affected by it and they're shapeshifted, then that shapeshifting is canceled. And while I appreciate that technically a grappled target occupies a different space than the grappler, I can see a lot of DMs saying, look, if you have a part of yourself wrapped around the enemy and you're holding them in Moonbeam, then you're going to have a little part of yourself in Moonbeam as well. And that means you're going to lose Wild Shape. I don't know. If you want to try this tactic out, it's a perfectly valid one. Making and maintaining a grapple isn't quite as easy as it used to be if we really wanted to build around it. You know, getting ourselves expertise in athletics and advantage on strength checks and things. But we will get some nice auto grapple options later. But just make sure that you talk to your DM about it beforehand to see if they'll make the Moonbeam affect you if you're trying to grapple enemies and hold them in the moonlight, right? Other than these free spells, I'd consider grabbing Aid to increase the max hit points of several party members, yay for more hit points, and thus longer time spent as a lion, right? Lesser Restoration for a little cure-all, Hold Person for some potential paralysis, though the spell is a lot better if we can more reliably cast it in combat, right? Pass Without Trace for some great utility to increase the stealth checks of your entire party by 10. Okay. What about spike growth? Oh man, some of you are groaning so loud I can hear you from here. 2 weeks in the past as I record this video. Do we make a cheese grater build? The first Moon Druid I ever built went this route, at least for part of their career. Again, like with Moonbeam, it's potentially viable and potent. The shtick here is, again, to grapple the enemy and drag them along the edge of spike growth while you stay safe, but your target takes a bunch of damage for moving through the briar patch, right? You certainly could, again, maybe with a green light from your DM. Some would argue that you would have to drag them behind you as you kind of drag a grappled enemy, and therefore you would have to go through the briar patch too and would thus take damage, or that since you don't technically have a free hand while wild shaped, but a paw or a claw, right? For that reason, you wouldn't technically qualify to grapple targets. But the bigger deterrent for me from going that route with this build is, yeah, I've done plenty of cheese graters. And like I've said, grappling isn't quite as easy to pull off and maintain with a build dedicated for it now, so I'm just not sure that I want to do that today. Plus, the complaints in the comments that I get seems to increase exponentially every time I build around the tactic. And I mean, spike growth is great, but it can also make life kind of miserable for your allies sometimes, so I know that it's potentially an option, and it can be really powerful, and I don't think I'm going to try and make it happen with the build today. Or at least, I'm not going to crunch numbers under the assumption that we are. No, I think instead, the spell I'd probably be concentrating on at this level would actually be Summon Beast. I love the summon spells, and Summon Beast might be my favorite for Moon Druids because It lets you summon a bestial spirit whose form you can dictate, meaning you could give yourself a little lion cub, and now you get to go into battle as Mufasa and Simba, and it's better than anything else you could possibly do. So, kind of reminds me of the Three Bears video that I did a while back. That was a good one. Yeah, you cast the spell with an action. It requires concentration. It lets you summon a land, air, or water beast that makes an attack using your spellcasting modifier to hit for 1d4 plus 4 plus the spell's level in damage. They can potentially attack more than once per turn. It's just, half of the spell level that you cast it at, rounded down. So once you're casting it at 4th level, you'd get 2 attacks, 6th level, you'd get 3 attacks, etc. They follow your verbal commands. There's no action required by you to command them, which is great. Best of all, land spirits have pack tactics too. So now you both get to have advantage while you take down your enemies as a couple of lions, like standing next to each other, and it's freaking awesome. At level 4, we get our first general feat, and this may surprise some of you, but I think that I would take Charger here. This will make a little more sense at level 6, but let's just discuss the feat. It's a dexterity or strength half feat, unfortunately, so I guess we'd probably just bump our dex to 15 now, and then says that if we dash, we get to move 10 feet further, but then more importantly, that if we move at least 10 feet in a straight line before attacking an enemy, if we hit them, we can either push them 10 feet away if they're no more than one size larger than us, and I think every beast that we would be wild shaping into is going to be large or even huge, so that's potentially important. Or, instead of pushing them, we can do an extra d8 of damage on the attack. Okay, is this really worth it? Shouldn't we be bumping our wisdom, since when wild shaped, we take on the strength, con, and dex of the beast we change into? Or like picking up more utility or defense or something? Arguably, sure. I'm building this character for sustained damage, and as such, I'm going to be looking to damage options first, even if it comes at the expense of other things, and even if it's a half feat for an ability that we don't care that much about. The thing is, we're probably going to be charging a lot on this build, as we'll see. So I think there's just some really nice synergy with this feat. Feel free to go another route if you want. I think the one that might be at the top of my list here instead would be Warcaster to help protect our concentration and bump our wisdom to 18. So yeah, do that. You'll be happy. I want to see what happens when we take Charger. At level 5, we get the new Wild Resurgence feature, which lets us spend a spell slot of any level to give ourselves another use of Wild Shape, no action required. I love this so much, and it makes me feel like, yeah, in all but the most hardcore adventuring days, we'll be able to Wild Shape when we need to. I also like that we can expend a use of Wild Shape here to give ourselves a first level spell slot once per day if, say, we're in a bind and we need to heal someone on the brink of death or something. Yay for versatility. We also get 3rd level spells at this level, and for our Circle of the Moon spell, that means we get Conjure Animals. Dang it all, Wizards of the Coast. Conjure Animals went from my least favorite spell in the game in 2014, as longtime viewers of the channel know, to holy crap, I have to get this spell on every character I play from now on in Unearthed Arcana, to I don't hate it, but I might not ever use this spell, right? They just have a hard time getting it right with this one for some reason, right? So Conjure Animals used to let you summon a billion elk and clog up the battlefield and ruin everyone's day. Now it summons a large pack of spectral animal spirits that, hey, could be a pack of lions, so that's cool. Or maybe like Pumbaa and Timon and Rafiki and Nala. But anyways, when an enemy moves within 10 feet of this pack or ends their turn there, or the pack first moves within 10 feet of the enemy, and you can move the pack on your turn just like when you move. No additional action required, so that's really cool. But when one of those things happens, then the enemy makes a dexterity save, and if they fail, they take 3d10 slashing damage, scaling by a d10 when you upcast it. So on the one hand, it's kind of like a roaming, reduced damage fireball that you can control, right? And that's great. But I mean, no half damage on a save. That kind of just kills the spell a little. It does. In Unearthed Arcana, you got to make an attack roll instead of force a saving throw. And that just generally would be a little better, I think, especially since you can do things to get yourself advantage, right? But yeah, as is, I think we're just going to be better off concentrating on other things, unfortunately. I mean, the damage is the same as Moonbeam as a 3rd level spell, right? But half the damage if they successfully save against Moonbeam. Sure, the area of effect of Moonbeam is smaller, and it takes your action to move it, and it's a Constitution save instead of a Dex save, but still, ugh. I guess if you want to have an AoE damage option that you don't want to have to worry about like grappling an enemy and holding them in place to get it to be effective, it's not terrible. You can move it around the battlefield easily, so that's pretty cool. You could potentially affect like multiple targets with it, right? But for single target damage, especially, which is what we're focused on today, it's not optimal. Instead, I think we should concentrate on Summon Fae now. It's similar to Summon Beast, but gives us a tiny, adorable fairy with a cute little sword who can teleport and stab baddies with advantage, and they hit a little harder than our summoned beast, at least at this level, so sorry Simba, you're out, at least for now. In addition, you'll want to consider Aura of Vitality for some super effective healing. Dispel Magic is always useful. Plant Growth and Sleet Storm can provide some nice AoE control, and Revivify, of course, is always good to have just in case a party member dies. Okay, at level 6, we get Improved Circle Forms, which says that our Wild Shape attacks can either do their normal damage or radiant damage now, which is great as it's so infrequently resisted, but maybe better yet, we can now add our wisdom modifier to our constitution saving throws. That is kind of so freaking awesome, and is one reason why I didn't sweat too much about like starting off in a class that has constitution saving throw proficiency, or like getting Warcaster at level 4, though it still would be a great choice. Because yeah, concentration checks are constitution saving throws, so we will have a much easier time holding on to concentration now than before, though having Warcaster and a higher wisdom modifier would be even better, naturally. But of course, the most important thing of all at level 6 is that we now get to transform into CR2 beasts. Yes, so in that Best Wild Shapes video, I talked about 4 here, and I'll re-emphasize that I think that they are the best ones. The Allosaurus, the Rhinoceros, the Saber-toothed Tiger, and the Giant Constrictor Snake. I said at the time that I thought the best damage dealer might be a tie between the Allosaurus and the Rhino, but I think for this build, I'm going to put emphasis on the Rhinoceros. Okay, the Giant Constrictor Snake might actually be more powerful than both of them, since they can both do solid damage and grapple with the same action, but for our purposes, single target damage, we're going to assume the Rhino. They have a solid +7 to hit, and if they move 20 plus feet in a straight line before hitting, they will do 4d8 plus 5 damage and knock the enemy prone. And we don't mind that they don't have multi-attack because that's a lot of damage with just one hit, and we can potentially get advantage on that attack from our little owl familiar that we've got with us, who naturally just rides like perched on our horn when they're not taking the help action. Don't forget, we do get our 3rd use of Wild Shape per long rest at this level as well. Okay, at level 6, it is time for our first damage report. So let's talk about what combat would ideally look like for us here, shall we? On round 1, I'm going to assume that we will be summoning our Fae Spirit, having them make an attack, and then use our bonus action to Wild Shape into a Rhinoceros. On round 2, and on every round thereafter, we're going to run 20 feet at our enemy and gore them with advantage thanks to our familiar and do some solid damage, adding an extra d8 from the charger feat plus an attack every round from our summoned Fae. Now, can we assume that we would be able to run at our target every round? Won't that mean taking opportunity attacks sometimes? Yeah, it might. Definitely something to consider. We do have 40 feet of move speed as a Rhino, potentially 50 if we have Longstrider on ourselves, so ideally once we hit the enemy, we could use some of our speed to back up a bit and try not to get surrounded, right? Yes, that enemy might get to make an opportunity attack against us, but if they're prone, they'd be making it with disadvantage, so I'm not too worried about it. If you really wanted to though, you could push the enemy 10 feet away with Charger instead of do the extra d8 of damage, right? They'd still land prone, but 10 feet away from you, meaning you could back up a bit without taking even a disadvantaged attack of opportunity if you wanted to play it super safe. If you do find yourself often getting charged and attacked by other melee enemies though, then yeah, feel free to go probably Giant Constrictor Snake here now instead, letting you both bite and potentially grapple an enemy on the same turn, dealing extra damage to them if they fail their grapple save. But assuming that everything worked according to plan, we would be doing 5d8 plus 2d6 plus 11 every round after the first. And averaged over 4 rounds, that means we would be against an enemy with a 10 armor class doing 32 damage per round, and against a 15 AC, it would be 28 DPR. And compared to other sustained damage builds that I've done to date at this level, well, that's not awesome. It's near the bottom of tier 2 here. Now, we bring a lot more to the table in the form of survivability and utility and support, so I don't consider it to be in a terrible place at all. But it's not topping the damage charts. That's okay. Not every build has to, right? Okay, what if you wanted to do the whole grapple and cheese grate them thing here? First off, The best beast to try and do this with would probably be the giant toad at this level. The polar bear has a higher strength score, but the giant toad just automatically grapples if they get a hit. And I'm sorry, but there's no way that a giant constrictor snake could grapple their target and then drag them along the edge of a spike growth field without somehow taking some damage themselves. It's just, surely most DMs would say 9 to that, right? But sure, let's say you go giant toad, you hit them and you drag them along the spike growth on their turn. They're probably breaking out on their turn with your pretty low escape DC of 12. And I mean, you've only got a +4 to hit, but with help from your familiar, it's a decent chance of success. Plus, toads have a long jump of 20 feet with 30 feet of speed. Of course, I mean, can you long jump the same distance with an enemy in your mouth? Probably half speed, since we don't have the grappler feet. You can see how this is all potentially problematic, right? Are you dragging them along the spike growth from inside of your mouth? Do you have to bend over? How far can toads bend over? Can you hop along while staying low enough to the ground for this to work? How tall are these brambles? Etc., etc. Anyways, in this scenario, if everything worked, with a +4 chance to hit with advantage, but hitting them would do a little damage and let you drag them 25 feet, including your jump along spike growth, on average, you'd actually do about the same amount of damage as you would as the rhino. 34 at 10 armor class, 27 at 15. If you could somehow maintain the grapple until your next round, then you could dash with your action. And of course, if you took the grappler feat instead of charger at level 4, then you could drag them more quickly for more damage, so that would be better. More like damage in the 40s or 50s. And sure, maybe a polar bear would make more sense because they'd have a higher escape from grapple DC, right? It would be a 16. But remember, even the initial grapple attempt now allows the enemy to make a saving throw, and they get to choose strength or agility. All this is to say that if your DM is on board with the tactic and you build for it and you can make it work, there's some solid potential for lots of shenanigan-y damage. But if that grapple doesn't work, you're gonna feel pretty bad just kind of sitting there and staring at the bad guy who's just standing next to spike growth, you know? You want to walk through that briar patch by chance? Of your own volition? No? Okay. Let's leave the cheese grating behind then and move on with what we are focusing on instead. At level 7, all druids get a cool new feature in 2024 called Elemental Fury. This is very similar to the cleric's Blessed Strikes feature and is a welcome boon. It says that we can either add our wisdom modifier to the damage that we deal with any druid cantrip, nice, but we're probably not going to take that option for this build because we would rather have the Primal Strike option, which says that once per turn when we hit with a weapon attack, or a beast form's attack in wild shape, we can do an extra d8 of cold, fire, lightning, or thunder damage. Nice little damage bump. It's only once per turn, but it's something, and we'll take it. We also get 4th level druid spells here, and the moon druid spell here is Fount of Moonlight. And I mean, in a world where Conjure Minor Elementals doesn't exist, I kind of like this spell. It's new to 2024 and is only available to bards and druids. It's an action to cast. It requires concentration and then emits light all around us for 40 feet and adds 2d6 of radiant damage to all of our melee attacks. What's more, it lets us take a reaction to force an enemy within 60 feet who damages us to make a Constitution saving throw or be blinded until the end of our next turn. That's pretty cool. Blinding an enemy is pretty powerful. The big head scratcher for me on this one though is that the damage doesn't scale. Why doesn't it scale? The blinded thing is cool, but it costs our reaction and allows a Constitution saving throw. So I would give that up for scaling damage on the spell any day, personally. How did this get through as is? And then at the same time, at the same spell level, we got Conjure Minor Elementals, which, yes, is available to druids and adds 2d8 damage per hit, as long as the enemy is within 15 feet of us. And that damage can be acid, cold, fire, or lightning damage. What's more, the area in the 15-foot emanation is difficult terrain for your enemies as well. But most damningly of all, as so many of us have talked about, right, is that it scales at 2d8 more damage per hit for every level you upcast it. I'm not going to get on my soapbox here about this spell. I've done it before. I'll just say this. If you can use this spell at your table as is, it's fairly balanced as a level 4 spell. It costs your entire action to cast, so the setup time is painful. It might, maybe, just maybe, even be okay as written for moon druids specifically, including the scaling damage. We'll talk about it as we go. It is a lot of damage, but at the cost of your action, and considering that you might lose concentration on it, maybe it's okay for us, maybe. So, am I going to use this spell on this build? Okay, I will at least talk about what the numbers look like if we did. I used it on the Valor Bard build. Check it out there. I used it on the 2024 Bladesinger. Check it out there, because we can't have a Bard beating out the Bladesinger for the top damage dealer, can we? That just will not stand. So at the very least, to compare apples to apples, okay, fine, we'll use Conjure Minor Elementals, but there's actually another reason why I feel a little more comfortable using CME as written on a Moon Druid, and it's this. Our hit chance and number of attacks are not going to be as high as Valor Bards and Bladesingers, and so it feels like it's just not quite as overpowered in the hands of a Moon Druid in wild shape as it otherwise might be. It's still very strong, but it's not really insane. I don't know. I'll show the numbers with and without the spell and let you decide. As for the other spell options to choose from here, I like Freedom of Movement for a concentration-free you can't slow me down buff. Polymorph, of course, is always great and might be fun to just use on yourself once in a while if you're out of wild shape uses or something, right? It would let you transform into higher CR beasts, though you're technically not wild shaped, so there's some things that are going to be different there, right? But let me also mention Wall of Fire here. If you were going for a grapple and drag and hold kind of playstyle, it's definitely worth considering. The damage is similar to Moonbeam's, 5d8 instead of 4d10 as a 4th level spell, right? But has a much bigger potential area of effect, a 60-foot long, 20-foot high wall, or a ring that's 20 feet in diameter, and then similarly says that when the wall first appears and when a creature enters the wall for the first time on a turn or ends their turn there, they have to make a dexterity saving throw, generally better than Moonbeam's Constitution, right? Or take fire damage, to be fair, generally worse than Moonbeam's radiant damage, but it doesn't have the problematic, is this going to cancel wild shape if I touch it verbiage. And since you can potentially use it to exert a little soft control on the battlefield, it's likely the better option. Of course, the spell many of you would prefer over any of these for concentration now, and I wouldn't tell you that you were wrong for choosing it, would be Conjure Woodland Beings. This spell got a massive overhaul in 2024, working essentially like Spirit Guardians now. It takes an action to cast, it requires concentration, it lasts 10 minutes. It's a smaller 10-foot emanation versus Spirit Guardian's 15 feet that does 5d8 force damage, that's awesome, on a failed wisdom save or half on a save. Oh, and yes, they take the damage both when you move it onto them now or when they move into the area for the first time on a turn or end their turn there. The great thing about this spell is that it's just easy. You turn it on, and now you're doing 5d8 more damage to potentially multiple enemies every round. No need to worry about whether or not you have advantage, or whether or not you can grapple and drag them, etc, etc. Okay, but cast as a 4th level spell. Is it better than Summon Fae or Summon Beast? Actually, no. At least not for single target damage. And Summon Beast is the winner here over Fae, since Pack Tactics gives your beast advantage on what would be 2 hits cast at the 4th level, right? Whereas the Fae, which hits harder per attack, only has advantage on their first attack if you make them fuming. So what you concentrate on all kind of depends on how you're playing, whether you want to focus on single target or multi-target damage, etc, etc. And I've got some bad news. It's going to get even more complicated because at level 8, yeah, these next 4 levels of this build are the most potentially problematic of the entire build, depending on how you look at it, I guess. So yes, we get a feat here, and I'm gonna say let's take the grappler feat, but it's by no means an easy, obvious choice. It really depends on a lot of stuff. It mostly depends on what beast you're going to be changing into starting next level, what spell you're going to be concentrating on, and when your campaign is going to end. Let's put a pin in the conversation for a minute and just say for now that the feat lets us raise our dexterity again by 1, putting it at 16. Good for our AC when not wild shaped, for our initiative rolls, though it is frustrating to leave our wisdom floundering, no doubt, but then also tells us that when we hit with an unarmed strike, we can both damage and attempt to grapple once per turn. Also that we don't have to spend extra move speed to drag a grappled creature with us, as we've said. And again, if we were going with a spike growth build, we would have taken this at level 4, right, for this feature primarily. But then there's the thing I'm most interested in for our purposes today, and it's that with the grappler feat, we have advantage on attack rolls against a creature we've got grappled. Okay, we'll get back to this in just a sec. Hold your horses. Let me just mention before leaving level 8 that we can now wild shape into flying beasts, and that's awesome. Now, there are no beasts in the new monster manual that can fly with a CR over 1. 1. And it's too bad that we don't get CR2 and 3 and above beasts to transform into here if we want to fly, but oh well. What's actually more surprising and troubling, and something that I failed to pick up on in that best beasts for every CR video, is that things like the giant owl, the giant eagle, the giant vulture are not considered beasts. They're listed with the other animals, but the giant owl and the giant eagle are actually celestials. The giant vulture is actually a monstrosity. So we don't really have like a great giant flying option now to transform into, which is a bit of a bummer. I think Wizards of the Coast probably wanted to get rid of us like being a flying mount for one of our companions potentially, though a giant bat would still be an option potentially. They're only a 1/4 challenge rating, but they are large and they can fly. So yeah, I think that's probably our best flyer at this point. So yeah, if they were trying to, remove the option for druids to like be a flying mount for other players, well, they missed one. And maybe that wasn't their motive, in which case I'm not really sure why they made the change to the giant eagle and the vulture and the giant elk too, for that matter. Anyways, at level 9, we can now, as moon druids, transform into CR3 beasts. And this is where we pick up the conversation on the whole grappling thing again. Okay, so our best option at CR3 in 2024, 2025, is the same as it was in 2014, though it is better now. And yes, we're talking about the giant scorpion. The giant scorpion is one of those automatically grapples on a hit, but with a slightly better hit chance than other auto grapplers we've seen so far. A +5 with a higher escape DC as well, though it's still not amazing, it's a 13. But here's the thing, the scorpion gets to make 3 attacks. That's a first for us so far. And 2 of them are with our claws, and if either of our claw attacks hit, then we get the auto grapple plus a d6 plus 3 damage. Our 3rd attack is with our stinger, which hits for a d8 plus 3 plus 2d10 poison damage. So if we truly wanted to lean into using like Conjure Minor Elementals on this build, we really want the grappler feat here. Because as great as 3 attacks are that add a bunch of extra damage to each hit, if you only have a +5 to hit and no advantage, you're still not hitting that often, not at this level. But if you have advantage on the first attack thanks to your familiar, and then advantage on the next 2 because you automatically grappled with that first one, right? And you have the grappler feat, then that +5 to hit is a lot less painful. Now, if you're not going to be using Conjure Minor Elementals, do we still want the grappler feat? Well, sure, if you want to be using Fount of Moonlight, or if you want to be dragging enemies over spike growth as a giant scorpion for more movement, or like trying to hold them in Wall of Fire or something. But otherwise, I think probably not. If you're concentrating on Conjure Woodland Beings, you'll get more damage by increasing your Wisdom modifier, right? Greater likelihood of them failing their save. Not to mention the other benefits that we'd get from a better Wisdom modifier. If you were concentrating on Summon Beast, then your Beast is going to get advantage on their attacks against your enemy regardless of whether you've got them grappled as a giant scorpion and we're getting advantage on those attacks yourself, right? So yeah, like I said, this all gets very complicated. I actually even put together like a little flowchart here when I was writing the script. It's just a mess, but like you need to know, am I focusing on single or multi-target damage? If single, is Conjure Minor Elementals allowed? Can I upcast it? What's the enemy armor class? If I'm focusing on multi-target, do I want to move around and zap enemies with woodland beings, or would I rather create an environmental hazard with Wall of Fire? But perhaps the most important question of all, actually, for, whether or not we take Grappler, whether or not we're focused on the Scorpion, etc., is when is your campaign likely to end? Because if it's going to go to level 12 or beyond, you might not want to take Grappler at all regardless. I know, it's so much to consider. But see, when we get CR4 beasts, we're definitely not going to be grappling. We might be at CR5 maybe, but I don't think I would most of the time actually. So taking the grappler feat is really only something I'd consider if I were either committing to the grapple and drag them thing, or if I just wanted to go all in on the giant scorpion and the campaign was probably ending before level 12. Whew. Okay. That was a lot, I know. I won't feel bad if you want to go back and listen to all of that again, or if you just want to try and wash it all from your brain and never think about it ever again either, for that matter. Let's move on to 5th level spells, which druids get here at level 9 as well. Moon druids get Mass Cure Wounds as a circle spell, meaning that we can heal multiple allies at a time, even while wild shaped, which is pretty cool. And then there's great stuff like Awaken that can potentially create a big treant-like ally for you, maybe, and Greater Restoration for the best cure-all, and Tree Stride for fantastic mobility, and Wall of Stone for solid control. What about Summon Draconic Spirit? As cool as it is, I think Summon Beast is actually a little better, at least for single target damage. There's other benefits to the Draconic Spirit, but yeah, damage-wise, I think we're better off sticking with the Beast. Okay, for the level 9 damage report. It's complicated, right? Let's do this. I'm going to assume that you're going all in on Giant Scorpion and Conjure Minor Elementals here just to see where we can get if we go that route. But in addition, let's look at the numbers if you decided instead to focus on Woodland Beings and ignoring the Grappler feat so you could get maybe Warcaster instead and bump your Wisdom to 18, just stayed with Rhino form since at middling enemy AC and up you'd actually do more damage staying Rhino with their superior hit chance and familiar advantage on their one big hit than you would with the Scorpions +5 to hit and no advantage on their second and third attacks, okay? If we were going all in on Scorpion and Conjure Minor Elementals, on round 1, we would be casting the spell at 5th level and Wild Shaping, doing 0 damage. But then on rounds 2 through 4, we would be making 3 attacks, I'll assume with advantage, thanks to our Familiar and the Grappler feat, each of which would add 4d8 damage from an upcast Conjure Minor Elementals, and one of those hits would do an extra d8 of damage, thanks to Elemental Fury. In that scenario, on average, over 4 rounds, against a 10 armor class, we would on average do 71 damage per round. And against a 16 AC, it would be 57 DPR, and that's really, really solid. But while at very low ACs, it's beating out any other build I've done to date at this level. Once you get into the enemy ACs that you're more likely to actually be fighting at level 9, it's middle of tier 1. Still good, but nothing crazy. And that's kind of why I said I didn't feel too bad about using CME on this build, even as it's written. For the record, if we used Fountain of Moonlight instead, it's 2d6 per hit. It's really not very good. 45 and 36 damage, respectively. That spell really needs to scale. As for the version of the build where we ignore Grappler, ignore Scorpion, and just stick with Rhino and upcast Woodland Beings at the 5th level, assuming that the enemy has a 50% chance to save against it, you're doing a respectable 50 damage against 10 armor class, 45 versus a 16 AC, but at 21, you actually end up doing more damage than the grappling Conjure Minor Elemental Scorpion. And of course, that is against just one target. If you're using Woodland Beings, you're likely doing more total damage regardless of the enemy AC, since you can move around and affect multiple enemies with it, right? So yes, all this to say that if it were me, playing this character in game, as much as I love the idea of getting a new beast to change into at CR9, I might just stick with the Rhino until 12, or maybe the Giant Constrictor or Sabertooth like we've talked about, right? And just remove the whole, can I use Conjure Minor Elementals from the equation and lessen everyone's heartburn. All right, let's get out of this quagmire and into more obvious choices, shall we? And I mean, I should probably clarify. Choices are good. Maybe it's kind of awesome that we can potentially do a lot of different things, change into a variety of different beasts, concentrate on a variety of different spells, depending on the situation. It makes for messy spreadsheets, but probably better, more fun gameplay, and ultimately, that's what really matters, right? Just know your options. Okay, let's move on. At level 10, as a Moon Druid, we get the new and awesome Moonlight step, which says that Wisdom modifier times per day, or if we spend a 2nd level spell slot or higher, we can use our bonus action to teleport 30 feet and have advantage on the next attack. This is amazing. It's an improved Misty step that we can use while wild shaped, and we will be making use of it for sure. At level 11, we get 6th level spells, and I think you've got to go with the obvious ones here. Heal is a flat 70 hit points of healing that also cures blinded, deafened, and poisoned. That's awesome. However, since it takes an action to cast and we can't use it while wild shaped, meaning we're most likely using it outside of combat, you'll get just as much healing over a minute with a 3rd level casting of Aura of Vitality, right? In which case, I'd probably prefer taking Hero's Feast here to get all the awesome buffs that it provides your party for an entire adventuring day. Alternatively, Transport via Plants is amazing for some big world hopping if you need it, but go ahead and pick your favorite here. The cheaters among us will be upcasting Conjure Minor Elementals with that spell slot anyways. At level 12, we have finally arrived at what feels to me like the biggest Moon Druid improvement when compared to the 2014 version, because not only do we get a feat so that we can finally at last take Warcaster, giving us advantage on our concentration checks and bumping our wisdom to 18, among other things. And yes, taking this even earlier would be a great idea. But we also can now transform into CR4 beasts. And that means we can be elephants, and boy, did elephants get a nice buff in the new monster manual. Actually, they showed up in the player's handbook, but regardless, we get multi-attack now, meaning we can make 2 gore attacks with our tusks at a +8 to hit for 2d8 + 6 damage each, and then yes, we're back to charging. If we move 20 feet in a straight line before an attack and the enemy is huge or smaller, nice. If we hit them, they are automatically knocked prone, and best of all, we can now trample with a bonus action against an enemy who is prone and within 5 feet of us. So we charge, make 2 attacks. If either of them hit, they're automatically prone, and we get a bonus action trample that requires a dexterity save against our DC of 16, and if they fail, they take 2d10 + 6 bludgeoning damage, and if they succeed, it's half. That is so freaking good. I love it. Note, that bonus action trample is no longer an attack, right? So if we're running Conjure Minor Elementals here, we're only making 2 attacks with it. I'm actually kind of grateful for that, as it keeps the power of the spell in check just a little. Other CR4 beasts here would be the Archelon and the Hippo. Either are decent if you need a swimmer, depending on how long you need to be underwater, but if you don't need to be underwater, I'd stick with the elephant here. And note, yes, that elephants don't get any kind of auto-grapple feature here, meaning that if we took the grappler feat back at level 8, it's largely wasted now. Hence why I said I probably wouldn't do it if I were planning on playing the character to level 12 or beyond, right? Okay, at level 13, we get 7th level Druid spells, and that means we can get things like Firestorm if you need some nice area of effect damage, the super powerful Reverse Gravity for really strong control and even some damage potentially, or sure, Mistress of Transformation. Draconic Transformation is for sure worth a look. It gives you blind sight, it lets you fly, and then gives a bonus action 60-foot cone breath weapon that does 6d8 damage on a failed dex save, half on a save. But yeah, there is some conflict here with the elephant. Now we'd have to choose which bonus action to use, and while a 6d8 breath attack is more damage than the 2d10 + 6 elephant trample, Draconic Transformation requires concentration, meaning you're giving up whatever else that you were getting from your concentration spell. So as much as I love the idea of a flying elephant that can breathe fire, we are like Dumbo on steroids, and you should for sure do this at least once in your game for the sheer hilarity and spectacle. Because no, the spell doesn't transform you into a dragon, right? There's no reason you would lose the spell's benefit after wild shaping. Are you breathing fire through your trunk? Surely you're breathing fire through your trunk. Anyways, unless you need a persistent AoE attack in combat, in which case you could use Conjure Woodland Beings, right? Or flight, you're probably better off concentrating on something else. And that then brings us to our next damage report. Okay, at this level, I'm going to first off crunch numbers, assuming we are casting Conjure Minor Elementals with our action on round 1, upcast now as a 7th level spell, and thus adding 8d8 damage per hit. Yeesh. But it's only on 2 attacks now. And I mean, it does mean that we're doing 0 damage on round 1. It's a pretty expensive price to pay. But then on subsequent rounds, we'd be charging in, making an attack with advantage thanks to our familiar, hopefully knocking them prone, thus making our second attack with advantage, and then getting a bonus action trample, forcing them to make a saving throw. Don't forget to add a d8 of damage to the first attack that hits thanks to Elemental Fury, another one thanks to Charger, and 8d8 each from Conjure Minor Elementals. But under those assumptions, averaged over a 4-round combat encounter against an enemy with a 10 armor class, we would on average do 100 DPR. And against a 17 AC, it would be 88 DPR. We hit that century mark barely. That is a really nice increase over last check, but again, compared to other DPR builds to date at this level, it's really good, but just kind of middle of tier 1, falling below non-Conjure Minor Elemental builds, even like that new Bladelock build, for example. Am I out of cards? So yeah, maybe, just maybe, CME on a Druid at least is okay. I don't know, maybe not. If we went a different route here, let's say summon beast, since it would get to make 3 attacks now with advantage, the damage isn't that much less, or at least not as much as you might think. It's 15 to 20 points of damage less depending on the enemy AC. And best of all, you'd get a healthy chunk of damage on round 1, since your summoned beast could make attacks the same round that you summon them, right? Conjure Woodland Beings, still a great option for consistent, like multi-target damage, especially every round. Maybe even more so now that we can bonus action teleport while wild shaped thanks to Moonlight Step. All told, we are just in a fantastically strong place right now. It is so good. Let's see how it fares as we get into the end game. At level 14, as a Moon Druid, we get Lunar Form, and this is just such a massive upgrade compared to the old 2014 1000 Forms feature. It says that once per turn, we can do an extra 2d10 radiant damage to a target that we hit with a wild shape attack. And this would be in addition to the d8 that we're getting from Primal Strike. It doesn't say it replaces that feature. And also, when we use Moonlight Step to teleport, we can bring a willing ally with us. So great, so much utility. This is a solid subclass capstone feature. Mwah. But at level 15, it gets even better. It is a smorgasbord of awesome things. Improved Elemental Fury increases our Primal Strike to 2d8 from 1d8. We get 8th level Druid spells, meaning we can Earthquake for some AoE damage and control, or Incendiary Cloud for some pretty potent, persistent AoE damage. Tsunami is incredibly useful to do damage in a big area and just like clear the battlefield a bit, as Chris, Treant Monk, so masterfully demonstrated in that Winnie the Pooh charity one-shot we did a couple months ago. But I mean, I think you kind of have to take the Animal Shapes spell here, don't you? It basically lets you wild shape your entire party into a CR4 beast or lower for 24 hours. And it kind of works like the old wild shape in that it gives everyone that you cast it on temporary hit points equal to the beast's hit points, and then ends when those temporary hit points end. So now you could be a whole herd of elephants with you as the matriarch. Or sure, a flock of giant bats. What's a group of giant bats called? Oh, now I gotta look that up. Oh, a colony of bats. Giant bats. Oh, and you can take a magic action on your turn to transform them again, and everyone can be a different beast if you want. It's so awesome. That said, you might not be the elephant matriarch of your herd anymore, since at level 15, we also get access to CR5 beasts, and that means we are probably going to be a Triceratops instead. That or a giant crocodile. I complained in that Best Wild Shapes video that the giant crocodile kind of got nerfed, and it kind of did, but it got buffed too, and it's still a really solid choice. One complaint that I had was that even though it gets a tail and bite attack, and the bite attack auto grapples, which is always nice, you can't make a tail attack against an enemy that you have grappled in your teeth. But of course, you could always make that tail attack first and then bite them, right? If they don't escape on their turn, I suppose you could always let them go on purpose to repeat, though that seems a little silly. But yeah, the auto grapple isn't super easy to break, a DC of 15, and they're restrained too, which is way better than just grappled, right? So the giant crocodile, still really good. That said, I think the Triceratops is a little better, at least for pure damage, since they too can multi-attack but have a higher hit chance, +9 versus the Croc's +8, and if they do a running charge before each of their attacks, they get some bonus damage plus knock the enemy prone. I talked in that video too about how we didn't have quite enough move speed to charge twice on our turn despite the Triceratops 50-foot speed, but one thing I didn't talk about is our amazing Moonlight Step that we can use as a bonus action 4 times per day now, or with a 2nd level spell slot, just like we were casting Misty Step, right? And we've got plenty of spell slots. So yeah, I think the Triceratops is the new winner unless you want to prioritize grappling and restraining an enemy, and in plenty of situations that might be the better choice, right? But at level 16, we get yet another feat so that we can finally cap our wisdom and bump it up to 20. Crazy that we waited this long. We shouldn't have waited this long, really. But at level 17, we get our 4th wild shape option, our 4th wild shape use per day, in case that matters, which is hard to imagine. And then the almighty 9th level spells, which, I mean, what do we take here? Sure, you could get Foresight. It's amazing. 8 hours of concentration-free advantage on every single one of your D20 tests, and disadvantage for enemies on all of their attacks against you. That is freaking amazing. You're burning Atium as a Mistborn. Okay, sorry, those playing the Brandon Sanderson game at home, take a drink. But I mean, Shape Change, the Shape Change spell. We're Moon Druids. Once a day, we could just transform into any non-construct or undead creature you've seen before, that is a bit of a tough caveat there, that is of CR 17 or lower. 17. So, I mean, what to transform into here is an entire video unto itself. What would we change into? Let's just say, for simplicity and maybe most likely to actually be seen by us sake, an adult red dragon. Now here's the kicker about shape change under the 2024 rules. It no longer prohibits legendary actions or legendary resistances or spellcasting if the creature has them. Yeah, I know. And you might think that's ridiculous, and I'm not going to get in a fight with you about it, but guess what? This is the real jaw dropper. Even if you could use all of the red dragon's legendary actions every round, including casting Scorching Ray and everything, a wild-shaped druid in Triceratops form using Conjure Minor Elementals as a 9th level spell still out-damages the red dragon every round until you get to very high enemy armor class. That's not all that surprising, you may say. Conjure Minor Elementals is busted. Moving on. Okay, fine. In that case, guess what else? A moon druid transformed into a Triceratops using the lowly Summon Beast upcast. Also, outdamages an adult red dragon with all their legendary actions until an enemy AC of 17 or higher. So, if your Dungeon Master wants to tell you that you can't cast spells and use legendary actions while shape changed, okay, fine, you can say, I'll just do more damage as a Triceratops. And part of me kind of goes, wait, what? That feels wrong. I'm not sure if I like that. But the other part kind of goes, hell yes, Moon Druids freaking rock. I love it. I should note, part of the reason that we can outpace the red dragon here is because those bonuses to damage that we get while wild shaped, 2d10 once per turn for lunar form and 2d8 for primal strike, apply to wild shaped attacks only. If you're shape changed into adult red dragon, you are not making wild shaped beast attacks, right? And that's a significant amount of damage that you're leaving on the table. Anyways, I mean, take the spell regardless. I think being able to breathe fire and fly and have legendary resistances and fireball and all probably more than make up for a little bit less damage against lower ACs. And I mean, big huge monster.
To let him finish the job, otherwise.
Be the dragon. It's amazing. Or sure, if not, take foresight instead if you want to really just commit to wild shape. Okay, we finally arrived at our last damage report. Whew. So much to talk about with this build. Let's do numbers again for Conjure Minor Elementals and for Summon Beast. With Conjure Minor Elementals, you're again casting the spell, then transforming, and starting on round 2, you're charging, making an attack and knocking them prone as a Triceratops, adding a d8 for Charger, 2d8 and 2d10 for your Primal Strike and Lunar Form. Then you will Moonlight Step away and charge again, this time against your prone enemy, right? Adding a ridiculous 12d8 from Conjure Minor Elementals to each attack, and thus, averaged over 4 rounds, you would on average, against an enemy with a 10 armor class, do 157 damage per round, and against an 18 AC, it would be 137 DPR. And that's amazing. And now we would finally be getting into like the upper echelons of damage dealers at this level compared to other builds I've done to date, only being beat out here by the 2 other Conjure Minor Elementals cheaters. The Valor Bard and the Bladesinger, who were making more attacks than us and with a higher hit chance, and so they were cheating harder. But it's only slightly ahead here of the Blade Lock. And if we were to instead concentrate on Summon Beast, we wouldn't be much worse off. It would be 140 and 127 damage respectively, so 10 or 15 less is all. And it comes complete with a clean conscience. So, okay, we've got to wrap this thing up here. What are we pushing, like 90 minutes now? Let's get into some final thoughts. The tier score for this build. If you take the damage that they do at each of the 4 damage reports for every armor class that we calculate for, average it all into one big number, we end up with a 71. Which puts us, not too surprisingly, in the middle of tier 1 compared to other 2024 sustained damage builds that I've done to date. And that's really solid. But it's not insanely OP despite using Conjure Minor Elementals for those assumptions. If we avoided Conjure Minor Elementals and concentrated on other spells, we'd still be in a great place, closer perhaps to like the bottom of tier 1 or top of tier 2 by comparison. So, okay, couple of questions here. First of all, should we let CME work as intended for Moon Druids? It's not quite as OP in our hands, right? And again, costing an entire action to cast is significant. You might be leaving an enemy alive to attack you and your friends on round 1 that otherwise would have died with a different spell, right? And that can have serious repercussions for a combat encounter. And I mean, yeah, I didn't even really try to build around the super strong Conjure Woodland Beings here, which would very likely do more total damage per round than even CME if you could get around the battlefield every turn and hit a few enemies with it. And that wouldn't be very difficult to pull off at all with the enhanced beast's move speed and later Moonlight Step, right? So I personally wouldn't feel all that bad using Conjure Minor Elementals even as written on this build. But if you can't, or you don't want to, I love the fact that you still end up with really powerful options here, regardless. But you know what I think my biggest takeaway from building this Moon Druid might be? I mean, I've spent a lot of time here going over what the best options would be at each level, but that it really depended on the situation, right? What spell you cast, what feats you take, and what beast you wild shape into kind of had all of these different complicating factors in them that really changed based on what the encounter was like, what your allies might be doing, what was allowed at your table. And there's a very small part of me, the optimizer, the min-maxer part who just loves sticking things in spreadsheets and just wants something reliable, dang it. That small part kind of gets annoyed by how sort of complicated this all is and how it all kind of depends on a bunch of different things. Just tell me the right answer. But the bigger part of me, the one who really just loves playing Dungeons and Dragons and having fun and getting into shenanigans with my friends and mixing it up and bringing variety and diversity into each encounter, freaking loves all of this messiness. The truth is, there probably isn't just one like best beast form for every situation. And that's kind of fantastic because I think you're going to have so much more fun playing this character in-game as a result. One encounter, you're a lion. The next, a rhino. Who knows, maybe even a giant toad or a giant scorpion. One encounter, you're throwing Conjure Woodland Beings on yourself and rampaging all over the battlefield. Another one, you're just running down and trampling over a single enemy. And maybe a third, you're grappling a baddie or two and dragging them around into and out of spell effects. I think the variety of gameplay from encounter to encounter and level to level will keep this build feeling fresh and fun throughout their career. And that's to say nothing of their sheer just mechanical power, which is, make no mistake, immense. And I mean, like, that's just taking into consideration their damage potential. We haven't even really talked about the fact that you are a freaking druid, a full druid with access to one of the best support and utility spell lists in the game, some of which you can actually use while wild shaped now. Put it all together, and the 2024 Moon Druid is, I think, at the very top of my to play next list. I think it would just be so dang fun. So, that's the build for the week. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you endured the length of it. I hope you know how much I love you, because I do. Thank you so much for all that you do for me, for this channel. You guys are the best. I hope you have a great day and a fantastic week. And if you don't, I really hope that you will hang in there and that you won't give up. I hope that you will do good and be kind and that I see you again very soon. But until then, take care. Bye. Tuesday is my favorite. So, when I was younger, my friend Dan Bailey, he's actually my brother's best friend, but he was my friend too, used to sing this song about Fridays, and it goes, Friday, Friday's my favorite, Friday's my favorite day. Monday is a bummer, Tuesday's only fair, Wednesday's getting better, Thursday's almost there, but Friday's my favorite, Friday's my favorite day. And I sing that now on Tuesdays, because it's Tuesday when I'm recording right now, and it very well may be while you're watching it, because that's the day that my videos come out. And for some reason, yeah, that's just turned into my Tuesday song now. Tuesday is my favorite day. Yeah, I got all fancy. I put a sweater on. I'm wearing my watch and my wedding ring, which I don't usually wear in videos for whatever reason, because I just don't think about it. I put cologne on. And my wife was laughing at me. She was making fun of me for being all fancy. But I'm just like, I don't know. I'm just feeling it today. It's going to be a long video. I got a lot of stuff to talk about. Just feel like this helps me just be more professional. I don't know. I got a nice blush backdrop, and I even have my Druid candle going from Tabletop Candle Company. It smells like a forest glade. And that means you're gonna lose wild shape. Hold, please. Okay. Oh man, I should have sung a White Lion song today. What was I thinking? Which Moon Druids get here at 9th level. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. What about Summon Draconic Spirit? As cool as it is, I think some beasts actually a little better, at least for single target damage. Yeah, those Draconic Spirits get 2 attacks, and the weapon is only 2d6 damage, and attacks otherwise they force slightly less than the Summon Beast, and they don't attack attacks, and they can fly, of course. Probably serves as fine, not even think, since they're large enough. Actually, this is immunities and blind sight. I'm talking about spells so much. Just cut this. There's no time. No time. Whew. I was in a writing frenzy when I was like Alexander Hamilton when I was writing the script. Okay. Don't even say that. Say 2d. Whew. That was a long one. I'm not gonna say that's what she said. I'm not gonna say it.